Hello and welcome, everyone. Thanks for joining us. My name's Todd Whitley. I'm the Executive Director of the Masterwork Music and Art Foundation. For those of you who don't know, the Masterwork Foundation has been around for over 50 years, supporting artists and arts in a series of grants, free classes, and today with this Zoom series, A Life in the Arts. A Life in the Arts was conceived to celebrate the life of artists and uncover some of the keys to their success in living a life dedicated to the arts. Tonight, I'm very pleased to welcome May and Watkins, and that includes Carol May, Tim Watkins, and their colleagues, John Franson and Chris Janikowski, who bring art to life in their sculptures and a number of public works that can be seen across the country. We have our esteemed colleague, Joseph White, here interviewing them. So with that, Joe, take it away.
We'll take it away. All right, so I thought I'd start off, since May and Watkins Design is a team, with the two people who make up the team, each getting a little bit of a solo bow. And so here is a few really lovely visual works by one part of the team, Carol May. And if you look closely, you may even recognize those two guys.
When we put some images together, we were to put together some early work of what we had done. And so I put in the first two images, and then how it morphed later on into a mural, which the murals and some of the Children's Museum installations that Tim and I began to do together were the beginnings of the company.
Okay. No, I'm going to move from Carol's solo work on to some of Tim's solo work. And you'll notice that there's already some things that you'll see in later work in here. I would love to just be in that environment for a while. It just seems like a wonderful place. And
thank you, Joe.
Here, I'm not so sure I want to be there because I think I'd sink. But other than that,
I could tell you a story about that piece, but I won't right now.
Okay.
Speaking about sinking, but that was me sinking, not the piece.
Okay.
But Carol and I both started as individual artists. I was a bit of a late bloomer to art. Carol knew what she was doing pretty much when she was born. She figured that she was going to be a painter, artist.
Yes.
Not born, but 9.
Yeah. And I got involved I started in some painting. I went into sculpture, and I found being at art school was like being in bliss, because I had full reign of every department. Being an obnoxious person, I just ran from department to department using their resources. But I got a scholarship to go. Actually, I didn't tell you, I am from Western Canada, the city of Calgary, Alberta, out in the middle of the prairie, across the Canadian border. But anyways, I was invited to go to Skowhegan's School of Painting and Sculpture the summer after I was graduated, and I drove out there, and it was basically an opportunity to work for 9 weeks unbothered by anything except for 3 meals a day and swimming in a lake. And
making art all day long and being supported without having to think about earning a living, not even phone calls. You were completely isolated.
Sounds like a deal.
Nirvana.
Yeah, it was nirvana. So we spent the rest of our lives looking for nirvana. And okay. Should I continue? Yeah. Sorry. I got involved in kinetic sculpture one of my favorite artists at the period was Jean Tingley, a French artist who loved to make kinetic things. His most famous piece in New York was a piano that caught on fire in a little trolley car that went racing across the patio of the second floor. I don't think he was well received by the museum. I think they were quite alarmed at his behavior. But anyway, his work was wonderfully bold. And so, you know, I started working with kinetics. And then actually, well, anyway, I'm going to go on to Carol and.
Actually, Joe, shall we begin to look at some of the other images?
Well, what I was going to say is we've now seen some independent work.
Yes.
And what I'd like to now move on to is what you've done together and what you're doing together. The thing that these kind of break into three different themes or three different areas of kinds of work. And let me share that. Hold on, let me do the slideshow thing so you see it big as life here and there. So you can see the prairie in these guys.
Now, this was one of our earliest, I would say, mature pieces together. Tim and I began to do installations together in our late 30s. And they were very small budget. They were mostly for children's museums, although we got some very nice commissions for the New York Historical Society. They were very open, free, fun, poorly paid, very low budget, but it was an opportunity to cut our teeth and learn what we were doing. It was also an opportunity to work with a variety of materials and master a whole set of skills. But what we're showing you tonight is really work from the last 15 years. It's our more mature work, and it's in line with what we are working on currently.
Okay.
This piece was created in, it's entrance sculptures for a large park in Colorado.
Mm-hmm.
Fort Collins.
Fort Collins.
Yeah.
All right. Okay, and let's move on. I have to tell it that I'm on that screen. There we go. Oh, I love this gateway.
This is a much more recent piece. So we did this actually last year, and it was installed in January in El Paso, Texas.
That's 2002-1 in the middle of COVID.
Well, we weren't, this was actually the first install that we didn't go to. They didn't want us there, and we didn't want to be there, and because of COVID. And so we actually managed to get them, we worked together with them, and they did an incredible job with the install. It's about 19 feet tall and 35 to 40 feet across. You know, cast glass discs. The snakes are mosaic and concrete. Yeah. And it's the entrance to a park.
It's called Mundy's Gap, actually.
Mundy's Gap. There's a I don't know what you call it in Spanish, but there's a line of mountains that sort of run right up to El Paso, and this is those mountains.
And this is interesting only because this is something that John and Chris and Tim and I all worked on fabrication together. Very often, Tim and I are up in the design studio, and John and Chris are actually building these things. Maybe you want to talk a little bit about what it was like to build?
Sure. Like most of the projects, it's a huge team effort. We take the drawings and the models that Tim and Carol put together and scale them up to full size. We work off the drawings and the models, and we start to bend pipe and create the piece in real time. And it's nice having them upstairs to refer to for any questions or concerns or occasionally issues, not too often.
We sit up there all day looking out the window, getting ready to
not true on this one, because the mosaics are usually done by me, and And Tim, it seems to me you did quite a bit of fabrication on this too. I do remember you grinding the top of the arch.
Okay.
I would say having models to work off is one of the best things about
And
our
actually,
process. It's really helpful.
one of the things we did here, if you wants to slide off, is we tried to include some of the models that we work from. You can see, I don't know if you can see it from here, but thanks, Chris. Sorry. But this is actually one of the models, and there's some drawings up there that were the development drawings for
It'll be
this.
all right.
Because when we're developing one of these things, we're also working with a client, and there's client input.
Carol, come on into the frame a little bit. We miss seeing you. I'm going to move on to the next one.
Okay, these pieces are actually in Portland, Maine.
Mm.
And it's a school, it's a LEED certified school. This was done in 2012, so it was in the early days of LEEDs,
Okay.
certified buildings. So we did these, there's 4 pieces, 2 are wind powered, 1 is solar powered, and 1 is water powered from the water on the roof.
You can see kinetic elements, all the blades and flowers spin in the wind.
Mm. Okay, next.
And do you want to start?
Actually, why don't you talk about the bats on
Sure,
this?
I'll talk about this one. This is a installation we did in Spirit Park down in Allen, Texas. We did a variety of flower and leaf-shaped sculptures around the park, sort of representing the local environment. And for this one, we did a pretty good job of resourcing a large quantity of aluminum baseball bats. See,
That's what they are.
Yeah, that's right. They look familiar now. Which was a really nice solution for a lot of the shapes that we were trying to get. That one called the Red Hot Poker.
Okay.
The mandate for this park in the design was that it was a butterfly park, so we had to use images that were selected from native plants.
Mm.
And that little park and nature center was the introduction to 4 huge baseball parks. So it was integrating the 2 themes.
There you
And
go.
this is a quirky but very successful solution.
All right. But you probably have to tell the people that those were baseball bats. If you hadn't spilled the beans, I would never have known.
Oh, that's great.
Anyway.
I think, when you're looking at it a little more closely,
Probably.
you can see.
Okay.
Yeah.
So anyway, moving right along, we're going to move on to the things that you've done for children's environments. And you've done a bunch of children's museum installations. And I've been to the one at the Brooklyn Children's Museum, which is just delightful. And so let's see.
That's it.
That's it, yes.
Yep, that is. And the kids can actually play in the water. And there's more things around for them to, things that'll float and stuff that they can play with. And it's just, I was there with my cousins who have little children, but they gave the adults in the party a special dispensation to enter the room because we really weren't supposed to be there. Anyway.
If Juliet had still been there, she wouldn't have allowed you in. It was really a 5 and under,
Okay.
But actually, it's a really interesting. The water play is a wonderful experience, both in once it's done and when you're working on it, because there's so much to learn on the science end of how things work, and you got the visual end of how things work, and so it's this piece worked out really well. The tanks, the water tanks here are actually they are the tank heads, for all the big trucks that carry liquids.
Mm-hmm.
These are stainless steel tank heads, about 6 and 8 foot diameters.
Right.
So they're, shallow, so most kids won't drown. I haven't heard of anyone drowning yet. But they also, they hold enough water to keep the whole cycle going.
Right.
And doing these children's museums for a little while in our career was really how we lived and how we functioned. And part of the reason was that we had a very good blend, and you'll see a little later on some of the other things of formal aesthetic qualities, as well as the innate ability of Tim and Chris and John to put together interactive elements. Interactive elements where people do something and then something else happens, so that they're actually physically engaged in the piece.
Right.
In this case, people can turn everything on the back wall with water guns, and you can direct the water with dance, and you make the fountain go another way. So they're all things that you can do to act on the piece that make things happen.
Right. So let's do another one. And this young man seems to be having a good time.
He's a little stiff. He's posed for the shot, but this was a show we did at the Children's Museum of Manhattan. I actually cut my teeth on interactive sculpture working at the Children's Museum years ago. I started in the maintenance area, and it was mostly fixing everything that everybody else made. So I learned a lot about how to build. But this is part of an exhibit of, this was the health.
Well, this was Eat, Sleep, Play.
Yeah, thank you.
It's two different areas. This was play and also the body. And if you go to the next slide, I think it gives you an overview. It's an overview of the show.
This is the entrance to the show.
And it was interesting because not only did Tim cut his teeth at the Children's Museum, but he brought me in to do designing and murals.
Kicking and screaming, mind you.
And we got picked up by the Bertelsmann Group to do a large exhibit for the host committee for the Grammys. We didn't apply, we just got picked up because they'd seen something we've done. And that's a long time ago, but it's when it occurred to me, goodness, we're getting hired to do this. We're getting paid to do this. We can give up all our part-time jobs and earn a living doing this. Certainly is very creative. It's as close and allied to art as we could get at that point. Now we have more play, we have more freedom. But in that time, we were thrilled to be doing these things.
Well, and the thing that I will say that this is a theme with the previous interviews that we've done, that artists find paths that allow them to practice, and sometimes they're a little bit off to the side. I mean, children's museums aren't fine art galleries, but you can make a living doing it, and you're actually creating art. And that's
so important, because if you don't do that, you end up doing your B job 60% of the time, and then it becomes 70% of the time.
Right.
You know it, you're not an artist anymore.
Right.
And I saw enough of that growing up that I never wanted to do that with my life.
All right. Well, next, we have a group, and these all follow another theme, and that is places to sit outdoors. In this case, while you're waiting for a bus to come by, or some other conveyance. But there's just a delightful, I don't know, it's just a delightful place to be if you've got and you can get at least mostly out of the weather. If you had a lot of side wind, it wouldn't give you as much protection as maybe you'd like, but it's just a lovely place to be. So we have a bunch of these actually. And
yeah, we did a series of benches. The bus stop We did 2 of them actually in Memphis.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, the weather isn't too crazy unless it's a hurricane coming up.
Right.
And, you know, it's a very fun way to create art in a functional mode.
Right.
And
for the public art people, it's a way to expand their budgets because they're given a small amount of money for public art, but very often they're given additional amounts for what are called amenities.
Right.
And that's seating, shelter, water fountains, whatever. So you're going to see several examples of our public art where the pieces are functional, and they're functional because that was one of the stipulations of the project.
Right.
In this case, this bench and the bench you're going to see next was based on the history of this town, which had everything to do with the railroad. So what you saw in the previous image was a rail bench, and this is a tie bench, but it's sculpture. It's a way of making sculpture and incorporating all those themes. Sometimes we fret against some of these things that we have to do, and at the other times we think that these challenges have really helped us grow as artists.
Oh, yeah, and I'm trying to think. Okay, that's the last of that group, and what I'm going to do is now. So we've been talking a little bit about process, but more about you know, the different pieces, and you've provided us with some really lovely illustrations of the process of how one of these things comes to be. And so I'm going to, well, you know what? Yeah, let's do this. So open. And yeah, the REG process one. Right. Okay, let's go here. And okay, this really is going back all the way to the beginning of the process. You know, this is a sketch on paper.
These things really start with a whole series of concept sketches. And you discuss that with the client. You know, is this what you want? Is this what you want? You go back and forth. And once there's some
agreement
about what you're going to do, our next stage is going to the model form. Then after that, construction drawings, and then plans, elevations, and engineers sign off.
Okay, so
this project, during all this part of it, Chris and John work with us in ordering the material and speccing the material, and in creating the budgets. The budgets are really not my strength, I've been told. And these, you know, the 3 of them work together, getting the information so that we can do the projects without breaking the bank.
Carol is very good at dropping zeros, but not so good at adding zeros.
Well, I was going to say, the thing is that this, so we're going to see in the next couple of slides some of the process of this becoming an actual object. So here's a piece of the object we just saw, and under construction, as it were. And here this is, I guess, the final assembly in the site. And it's hugely enhanced by the color being part of it now. And then this is the finished work. And we have another view because you're only seeing the one end of it here, but that's the entire extent of it. Now, so is this a playground piece? What's the functionality of this piece, or just a piece of art?
This is a rooftop climbing structure at a school. So this provides kids with outdoor physical activity, interactives. There's also a water play on this roof as well. So kind of have a fully immersive experience when they go outside.
Well, that's great.
Part of the intention also is that it's an art experience so that you don't walk on that roof and feel like you're in a playground. You feel like you're on a rooftop and there are beautiful things to look at.
Well, I was going to say, it's not like your typical jungle gym.
Yeah.
They never are that. You can
It's, you know, there's climbing and all of that stuff, but there's color and beautiful shapes. So we have another illustration of process, and this is a work that you're currently creating. So let's see here. I have to load up another PowerPoint. And that's this guy. So, you know, so this is, you were saying that the process was from sketch to model. So this is step, well, probably not step 2, probably step several hundred and 2.
Yeah. And there are often many iterations of the models as well.
Yeah.
And so this looks like model 1, and there are about 3 or 4 models for this piece.
Right, and of course, the figures give you a sense of what the ultimate scale of the piece is going to be.
It's very important in terms of getting, you know, it's not only about figuring out the visual look of it, it's about figuring out the materials, how everything fits together and breaks apart to move it. And you know, there's actually another model beyond this one this is inch to a foot. And the next one was 2 inches to a foot because we needed to figure out where we had areas that we thought might be unsafe.
Right.
So, and
do we have that? No, we're going straight into live things here, but let's.
And I think Chris should talk about the hell of the backyard.
Oh, well, I don't know. Yeah, I mean, you know, to talk about the model a little bit more, and then, you know, to see what it says. Another function of the model, like Tim was saying, is, you know, figuring out attachment points. And I'm always amazed at how much of the engineering and the process can be solved in model form. And it's always so, I mean, almost literally magical to me to be able to translate, you know, to have these guys build a model and then be able to sort of very seamlessly translate that into something, you know, as huge as that. That photograph there is, you know, taken from the second floor of our shop. So looking down, so, you know, you're up a couple of stories, and yeah.
And there's something else that happens in this process, which is as this thing gets built and it's so much larger, there's a subtlety, a delicacy, a finish, kind of wonderful things that get resolved along the way. For example, it's hard to see at this point on this model, but Chris made a series of buds that go in it. In the model, you can see it, they're the red shapes. And, you know, at first they were just all very, very finely ground. And then he started adding ornamentation on it. Ornamentation was wonderful. Areas that were rough, areas that were smooth. And these changes get integrated into the overall work. And everybody contributes. It's not like, oh, this is stone and this is, you know, these are the plans, follow them. It's quite a fluid work from concept really to finish. As a matter of fact, they came in this morning and we changed something. We changed one of the glass rings because when it was put up, it just didn't feel right. It didn't look right. The angle wasn't right. So this morning they spent making templates and ordering the proper steel donuts to hold a new piece of glass that we're adding. So
they dread Mondays for a number of different reasons.
Well, the trouble with Monday is you've had all weekend to think about it.
Yes.
And you usually do think of things. So.
Well, we live in our shop.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I'll spill the beans a little. I live just a couple doors down from Tim and Carol from the shop. And so you know, if something does come to mind on a Saturday or Sunday, or
yeah,
I can definitely, not that I'm getting called over, but you know, it's nice to be able to walk back there and not only show it off, but you know, something might come to you in the middle of the night, have a eureka moment, and like run out my.
We have one more picture of this which is it's those guys. There were. So that's. Are you attaching or polishing at that point? Because it looks like
we are attaching and fitting.
Making
sure they sit just right around the main column.
Right.
The piece, yeah.
Yeah. So it kind of at this point of the project of building it, we've built essentially all of the component parts have been fabricated, and now the part of the process is we've taken it apart. We're now going to put it all back together and make sure that, you know, everything fits together smoothly. Then really the next step on these ones specifically is that they'll be sent to a galvanizer to be made weatherproof, and then, you know, next step in the process.
Yeah. Okay.
What's wonderful, Joe, is that we've had, you know, with John and Chris, we've actually, you know, we've entered a larger scale world, because Carol and I are rather small in scale, but I think that's part of the reason that we build large things. But it's wonderful to have the help, and also to have people who have, one, the patience to deal with us, and two, to, you know, actually help us with ideas, and to help, you know, make everything fit together and work. It's
well, and plus, you know, who I'm coming back to just us now, but because we have to at least leave some of it where we can actually see you, and not just the little postage stamp. But no, and you know, plus the other things that were brought up in talking about these. I mean, there's the safety concerns. There's simply, it's got to be engineered so it will actually hold together.
Yes.
Yeah, and actually, I'm going to brag about this. We've been through several hurricanes, a flood, and we've never lost a piece since we've been a company. Fortunately, Tim did all that before we became a company.
It's true. I kind of, you know, I refined my engineering skills on some of my earlier work when it fell down.
I must say, I did the same thing, but it just peeled right off.
That can be how you learn.
Anyway, what's wonderful about what's going on now is how collaborative it is. That we've worked together long enough, and John and Chris are finely tuned and trained and sensitive.
Did you say finally or finally?
Final, finally, as in finer. So that it becomes a collaborative conversation, and everybody adds information and makes it better and richer, and it's quite wonderful. It's wonderful for us.
Well, and you're actually now going to have to start learning how to do that with other people, because you're actually starting a business of helping other people realize these kinds of dreams and structures, which is really exciting.
That's true. Yeah. Well, they're not losing us entirely. We love working. We work with them as long as we can, but we're also branching off a bit and looking.
That's great.
But we're very excited about that.
Yeah. That's yet another life in the arts being created, and that's really cool. Well, listen, thank you all so much for sharing all of this wonderful work and about your process. And this has just been a really delightful time to spend with you. Now, we are going to open up for questions and answers in a minute or two. But in the meantime, Todd, you want to vamp us off?
Yeah, I'll say thank you again to Carol, Tim, Chris, and John for sharing your experience and your expertise and your time today. So appreciated. This was such an impressive survey of work. For our viewers, you can find out more about Masterwork by visiting our website at masterworkarts.org or following us on Facebook or Twitter. And you'll see that we post about our Life in the Arts series in each of those places pretty regularly.
Okay.
So with that, we'll go to questions.
We'll go to Q&A. Anyway, thanks very much again.
On the project. And we work on the projects, you know, with that in mind. You know, it's not specific that you couldn't take the piece and put it somewhere else, but it is, you know, related to the site where it lives.
Yes. Yes. Yeah, I have one other question, but I don't want to take away from someone else.
I think you're good.
Yeah, go for it.
Okay, so my other question is, I'm fascinated by the collaboration aspect. So many people working together, and I can see how everyone has their skill set and their expertise, and so it definitely is a big collaboration. Do you ever disagree?
Do you want to take this one, Chris?
Or John, do you want to take this one?
Can you guys hear me?
Yes, we can.
Oh,
I can see you. Turn on your
I
screen.
can't see my video. I think disagreement is a great part of the process, actually. It happens occasionally, and actually more than occasionally, probably happens daily. But the disagreements usually lead to better solutions in almost every scenario, because it just opens the dialogue to eventually a better solution in most cases, I would say. Chris, I don't know how you feel about that, but
Yeah, certainly. I think it's important always to remember the distinction between like a positive disagreement and like a destructive disagreement.
Yeah.
And yeah, I mean, I think we have disagreements just about every day, and very few of them I think are destructive, like at all. But no, it's and I think like there was you noted perceptively that like, yeah, I think we definitely each bring our own strengths. And also one of the great things about being part of this team and being able to work here is the freedom to really leverage everybody's specific style of doing things, way of doing things. Carol and I can be kind of similar about certain things, but like, so we work well together, but in that same way, I work really well with Tim, and John and I work really well together. So yeah, disagreement, but always productive, I think. For sure.
Probably the most.
Well, go ahead, Todd. Tim.
Okay.
Go ahead.
The biggest disagreements usually happen between Carol and I, and me. See, it's already started. It's just because we also live together, so we sort of feel more like we can act as husband and wife as well. But as John and Chris said, there's a huge amount of benefit to having a discussion about stuff, and it's always ongoing because as these pieces evolve, I mean, we're jumping from a scale of 1 inch up to 18 feet, whatever. There's things that you can't see at 1 inch that are totally obvious at 18 feet. So you have to take that into mind and realize that there is going to be an adaptation. I think the hardest thing with sculptors and having things fabricated by outside fabricators is that the sculptors don't pay enough attention when it's being fabricated, and they'll lose some of the, on that small scale, it looks like a gem. On a big scale, it looks like doesn't make it. And I think that's a big problem with a lot of large sculpture.
Well, I can see how there are differences in, say, fabrication as opposed to aesthetics. And I want to zero in on that because aesthetics is really very individual. And do you all have like different aesthetic? Like, let's just say, can someone say, oh, I hate that color. These colors don't go together. Or I'm going to guess that one of you is dominant in that aesthetic aspect. Or not.
Alice, we have a machine at the door and it rewrites everybody's brain as they come in, so we all feel alike.
Yeah. No, I would, yeah. No, I don't know. I credit to everybody, but I don't know. I think Carol's a real driving force on a lot of the overall aesthetic, like the tone, like you mentioned the colors. Like we definitely, I think John and I, at least, or I can speak, I feel like we have input for sure. And as like Tim was just saying, when things get to scale, once they start getting built, we might run into something that either is a fabrication issue, it's hard to build, or because John and I, we're both artists as well, it might be what we think is an aesthetic issue. And I'd say 9 times out of 10, if I bring something to Carol, she'll say, oh, good eye, like that's cool. Or,
oh,
no, but like, you're right, let's do it this way. And yeah, that's very satisfying as as an artist and as a craftsperson myself. Yeah.
And it makes a huge difference because sometimes I'm distracted on the next project, and John or Chris will say, what do you think of this? They'll call me out, and I'll go look at something. They're absolutely right, and something needs to change. It's this synergy among us is wonderful.
yeah, impressive. That's all I can say, that you work together that well.
Yeah.
Eileen, you had a question?
Yes. Have you ever been commissioned to do animal sculptures?
Actually, yes.
What?
Well, we did an armature for a horse.
Made the horse.
That was a for Fred.
We developed some animal ideas for a competition out in Thornton in Colorado.
Oh, right. Oh, yeah.
And the models are beautiful. It's just, they didn't like, we weren't chosen, but it was an interesting venture into the world of animals. And Carol, we keep coming back to Carol. She's actually the leader and the ruler. No, I'm kidding. But she's probably the most studied of all of us in terms of training, and her sense of form and, basically how animals are built, whether they're humans or horses or cats. She understands the internal anatomy very, very well. And, so I might make something that looks like a puffball and call it a cat. She will be much more, distinct in terms of bringing out the forms, the muscle, the bone, et cetera, et cetera.
Interesting. Thank you.
You're welcome.
What's funny about what we're asked to do is we haven't done much figurative sculpture. Consequently, we're not asked to do figurative sculpture, although we could do it. You get a little bit compartmentalized, and we look for opportunities to break out of that.
Yeah, I think, up until, I've been with May and Watkins now for a little more than 2 years. And I don't know if before I started working here, I necessarily would have considered myself, an artist. And but that being said, to your question specifically about animals, I personally have, the first big piece that I would like to make myself is definitely animal themed. And, John and I are in the process of branching out and not necessarily starting our own company to do something different, but to put the steps in place to kind of continue what we've learned here. John has worked here for significantly longer. I view this as a real, very traditional sort of like a mentor apprenticeship situation here. And Tim is correct that Carol has a lot more formal training, but I learn, I think, equally from all three of my team members for sure, despite having significantly less in the shop experience in this specific thing.
Right,
Interesting.
great.
I'm wondering, I can't believe I'm the only one here that wants to know, Tim, what's the story about the water sculptures?
The story about at Brooklyn? Or you?
Falling in the
Yeah, in the presentation,
Oh,
there was an image of,
Yes.
that was done at Socrates Sculpture Park. And it was about, there were three of these plant shapes. They were mounted about 30 feet off the shore, and they basically worked like toilets, where the flower was the float, and there was a pipe that went down into the muck underneath in the East River. And I occasionally had to go out there, and I went out there one time, and it was like early January. It wasn't, it was a nice January day, and I was given a rubber dinghy to go out and just check on everything. And so I paddle out there, and I'm out there sort of tinkering with things, and I look down and I notice that there's very little air left in my little dinghy. So it was like Keystone Cops. I turned around and I paddled like a madman, and I made it to basically about 2 feet off the shore. So that's the story behind that part. It's a dangerous business. Not only is it a dirty job, but it's dangerous, but someone has to do it.
Right. Okay.
well, I'm also wondering, is there a little league out there somewhere that's recovering from the aluminum bat shortage, the Spirit Park project?
I've been told by John Franzen should answer this, but I was told that they no longer use that kind of bat. John, are you still here? Can you answer that one?
I'm still here. They still use that bat. So they've upgraded to some slightly better alloys, I think. But I think we got over 400 bats for that project.
It was 400, 500, yeah.
And we were really exhausting all the suppliers of used bats in the country for 3 or 4 months. Yeah.
Well, this is a more serious question, actually, to all of you. And because you've managed to create this amazing thing and produce so many incredible works, having a great impact, getting here is really the challenge. Is there some advice that you wish that you would have received when you were a younger artist?
To become a doctor or lawyer? I think, may I start?
Yeah, you start.
I think that the big thing is that you have to be addicted to making art. It's not just a hobby. It's something that I remember there was this wonderful audio tape by David Smith, who was, a very famous sculptor in the 60s. And he talked about, going to bed and waking up, and the first things he thought about were art and his sculpture. But it's really, you have to have the commitment, and you have to, as long as you can somehow manage it financially, you have to just persevere and believe that you're going to get there. And I mean, whatever getting there is, I'm not sure. We can make a living. We have 2 people that work with us. It's great. Do we make a lot of money? No. But we really enjoy what we do. And I think that's a really key, part of being an artist. And I think that I would say that if you got the bug to do it, then you just have to persevere.
Yeah, and I would add actually 3 things. One, we started in an urban center, New York City, and there were lots of opportunities because we weren't isolated. And I think that was important. The second is we took every opportunity, everything that was handed to us, everything that was offered to us, whether it was a benefit, place settings, or an interpretive exhibit at a history museum. We took every opportunity and did the very best work we could do, as fully committed as we can be, with every opportunity we got. And the final thing is you have to have some faith that it's going to work out, because it can get really sad and hard and scary.
Yeah.
Okay, Chris or John?
I can go. Yeah. Going from what Carol said, the piece of advice that I was given was from my father, who is an architect and an accomplished guy in his own right. He always stressed the importance of taking an opportunity, every opportunity that you're given. You'll figure out how to do it. Just take it. And to the question, the piece of advice that I wish that I had been given is that sometimes a piece is finished. Then you need to know when it is finished and move on to the next thing. And it's not a matter of setting priorities, but it's I think without getting too metaphysical, it's both like a physical and a mental thing. Being satisfied with be satisfied with what you've done, and not worry too much about it. I think, know that you've done a good job.
Nice.
Because it shows, yeah.
And I think we just lost John.
Yeah, it looks like that. Oh, well.
How convenient.
Well, we are after 9. And so we've filled a very good hour, I think. And thank you all for your contribution and all your years of wonderful work, and for sharing it with us. It's just been a delight.
Thank you for this opportunity.
Yes, thank you very much.
It's not that often that we get to blabber at the mouth about, so it's we enjoy it.
And now we get to make this go viral.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you all, and good night.
Thank you
night.
so much. Wonderful, wonderful.
Yes.
Good night.